Hello and welcome to So What You're Saying Is. I'm Peter Whittle. Now, before our show this week, I just want to say a very heartfelt thank you to everyone who subscribes to the channel. We get new subscriptions every day and rising, and also to all of you who donate too. Thank you very, very much. It's hugely appreciated by us, and I hope we continue to do you proud. My guest this week is out of the usual run of people that we have on the channel, and all the better for it. He's a man who does something which I'm sure you will find very, very interesting. Joshua Humphreys is an author. He is the writer of comedy novels. He is a self-described traveller. And also he's the founder of something called the New Cavalier Reading Society. And he's joining me now. He's in the Ukraine. He's joining me now. Thanks very much for coming on, Joshua.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. First of all, can you explain to me what is the New Cavalier Reading Society?
So functionally, it's a members-only group dedicated to discussing humanity's most profound questions as explored by its most ingenious minds. And the way that translates to the real world is that I have these books called, they're my commonplace books, 4 volumes thereof, and they're not available to the general public. And when you become a member, I send them to you. And then throughout a semester, we all read the same pages from those commonplace books. And at the start of the week, I pull 4 questions from the commonplace books, from the reading, most often questions advanced by the authors themselves.
Yeah.
And all through the week, we try to answer those questions in our own time. And then we come together at the weekend, and I lead us through discussions of everything we've been reading.
So I've noticed you have a massive following on social media, on Instagram. Is that how you communicate mostly on social media? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm told to branch out, but I don't have the time or the energy to use any other platform. So everything tends to go through Instagram.
Right. But with the society, why should people join it? What is it, why did you set it up?
I set it up as a way to share the commonplace books. They are such unique volumes. They contain, I think, something like 6,000 quotations from over 1,200 different authors, and they range really from the very beginning of Western history up until the present day. And anybody who is vaguely interested in Western culture can get a much more interesting and intimate look into what Western culture means by engaging with its questions.
Yes. So in fact, this you mentioned, in fact, I've seen you've written that this is about really looking at Western culture before, as you put it, universities crushed it.
Yes.
How did they crush it? I think
they
I
crush
know.
It through. They crush it through first of all by tainting it with a kind of original sin. They begin with certain premises, such as Western culture is racist. And then they go around in circles trying to prove that Western culture is racist. And that's the sole filter through which they put 4,000 years of Western culture.
Yes. So it is basically, did you sort of start this almost in a response to this current situation we're in? Because, I mean, it seems to me that Western culture is pretty much under attack.
No, my view of it under attack has only come into sharp focus the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Particularly last year. But in 2017, when I started it, I was very much outside of that realm. And the more people that have become members, and the more people that have come through the Reading Society, the more gaps I've found in knowledge and a greater inability to combat Western culture's enemies intellectually.
Yes. Where did your interest come? In looking at all of this?
So my itinerant aunt was a spinster her whole life, and she would travel to Egypt every other year, to Venice in the intervening years. She had the only tapes she had on VHS were Indiana Jones, so that kind of instilled an early love of the excitement of history in me. And then at university, I have a history degree from La Trobe University. And the first lecture I ever attended was on the French Revolution, and it was given by Professor Bill Murray, who I'm not sure if he's still alive, but if he is, I would very much like to thank him. And he would stand in front of a huge undergraduate lecture theater and just speak on the French Revolution from memory for 55 minutes, moving in and out of French, English, German, Italian. He wouldn't translate for anybody. And by the end of these 55-minute lectures, you were just enthralled by the excitement of Western history, European history.
Yes. And that's something that's obviously stayed with you.
Absolutely. I made a point of having him as my tutor in all the subjects that he taught. And then halfway through that degree, he was replaced as the professor of, or the head of the kind of Nazi department of the history faculty. His replacement was not of the same caliber, and so I had to seek other intellectuals, if you will. But that year and a half has always stuck with me.
Yes, but you would say that primarily you are a writer of comedy novels. So, basically, what would you call a comedy novel then? Actually, Joshua, what is that?
A comedy novel is a novel that's written with the sole intention to amuse, to make laugh. Yeah. I started out as a stand-up comedian and performing in my own plays at university. And then in my fourth year, I had this lightning bolt moment when I picked up A Handful of Dust by Evelyn Waugh.
Oh, yeah.
And by the end of the first page, I knew that it was smarter and funnier than what I was doing. I was making frivolous Monty Python kind of sketches. And I just knew that I had to be writing novels, or that I had to incorporate the comedic element. So I pitched them as though you're reading a sitcom or a Will Ferrell film on paper.
Right. And can you just tell us a little bit about, you have told us about your education there, but where are you originally from then, Joshua?
Melbourne, Australia, from the criminal classes of outer suburban Melbourne.
Right, okay. But you lead, it seems like quite a nomad existence. Is that wrong?
Nomad it's a loaded word nowadays. I see myself as an exile. Even now I can't return to Australia. It's illegal. But first for economic reasons, I had to escape to Southeast Asia because for 4 or 5 years I wasn't making enough money to live anywhere else, and I fell in love with that region of the world. And at the moment, I have to move around at the time because of usually visa restrictions.
Yes.
As an Australian, you can maximum stay for 3 months at a time in most places. So I tend to flit around.
Yes. And you sort of take people with you, isn't that right to say? I mean, virtually speaking,
I try to. I have a year for 3 years. I ran a Venice tour that I built in situ in Venice, and then last year I turned that into a virtual tour. So that can take people to Venice, and I'm doing the same for ancient Greece this year. Planning on spending the rest of the year in Greece.
These are the very places that are the very foundations, if you like, of our civilization. I mean, I was very interested in one, it's probably not the motto of the Cavalier Reading Society, but I don't know, maybe it is, but you wrote it, "Only the wise are free."
It's a quotation from Cicero.
Yeah.
Solum sapientem esse liberum. And I don't subscribe to kind of civilizational freedom. I more subscribe to the later Stoic idea that it is wisdom that equals freedom.
Right.
And Heraclitus said wisdom is being able to see the one thing that threads through all other things.
Yes.
I just feel as though in order to be free from all temporal intellectual constraints, you have to be able to see the larger picture.
Right.
And that's what I try to impart.
But we don't really see, or rather should I say, freedom now in that sense has sort of become rather perverted in the sense that now it's seen almost entirely as a matter of choice, isn't it? It's seen as having choice in life, but it's not really about that, is it?
No, that's a kind of capitalist consumerism conception of freedom.
Yeah.
Which I don't at all ascribe to.
Right, right. So you pretty much plough a lonely furrow, would it be right to say?
It would. It's a very lonely life. Not lonely life. It's a solitudinous life.
Yes.
But I'm well aware that in order to do the amount of work that I do and to write a novel a year, I cannot have distractions like large groups of friends.
Right.
Or yeah.
Right. But I mean, what's interesting, I mean, obviously you know the sort of things that we've covered on this channel, the big preoccupations that we've had. And it seems to me that actually providing some platform or some association or society for people to learn about things that once they might have taken for granted is extremely valuable. I mean, do you see yourself as, you know, in some way providing a kind of service like that? I mean, do you know, is that what motivates it?
It definitely what motivates me is to have people cherish what they do not know they should be cherishing.
Right.
And to value things that we are either on the verge of losing or that we've already lost. And to value them means that we might have the will to recover them at some stage.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, when we're, you know, again, one of the things we've discussed endlessly on here, unfortunately, but we have to, is the sort of, you know, the woke attack. Is this something that you have a strong view on? Because frankly, from what I can see, it seems entirely, well, first of all, hugely ignorant of the kind of things that you talk about, for starters, but then also dismissive or indeed utterly hostile too.
I didn't know what woke was until last year.
Right.
But it's been a baptism of fire, figuring out what it is, figuring out its strengths and its weaknesses. And I firmly believe that in the face of woke, if you will, in the face of woke arguments, reason and logic is the only thing that can stand up.
Right.
But if they attack people who do not know what they're talking about, or who have the kind of prejudiced background against what they're talking about, we don't stand a chance.
Right. So how do you confront them then with reason and logic?
Well, it's all about knowing. I don't like to take an adversarial position, but it's all about knowing your enemy. Right. So in the Reading Society, when we have those 4 questions each week, very occasionally, the reading will be preoccupied with one subject, such as ideology or Marxism or the Vietnam War. And for that week, I would just make the focus a kind of lecture that I give. And so I can explain to people what Marxism is, where it came from, what it does, what its intellectual tricks and falsehoods are. The same with ideology. And I also direct them to a large body of wider reading, where they can find out as much as they possibly can. The best writer on ideology I've ever read is Michael Oakeshott.
Yes.
And if you, the chance of you meeting somebody who's ever heard of Michael Oakeshott, minimal, I find.
Right.
But just to be able to tell someone to read Michael Oakeshott, I consider that invaluable in itself.
What about someone like Roger Scrutin?
Roger Scrutin, I've never read him on ideology. I try to stay away from books that purposefully espouse the cause of conservatism. Yeah. Because I think that it has a bad name in public discourse. And so if you identify yourself as a conservative, you're very likely to immediately have your views dismissed. Yeah. And so we have read On Conservatism by Sir Roger Scrutin. But I do tend to direct people to authors who do not kind of overtly identify it as political in one way or the other. Right. John Ruskin is there are 2 authors, John Ruskin and Nietzsche. And just directing people to read Ruskin or to read Nietzsche, neither of them identify as conservative, although Ruskin does is in his autobiography, but he claims it's a Homeric conservatism. But if you just get people reading those authors, they will automatically come across values that are anti-woke, that can fight woke, and that don't plant you as a political conservative, but you will find that the things that you value align very closely with small c conservatism.
What do you think has been the effect of the whole pandemic and COVID on on our civilization? I know that is like a massive question for a whole volume, I'm sure, but it's not been a good one, has it?
No, it's the I've always had a kind of inherent faith in humanity, in its goodness and intelligence, and the pandemic destroyed that and
Really?
pissed on its ashes. I have never seen so many people so readily relinquish so much freedom in the space of a few months.
Right.
It made me nauseous.
Yeah. It's particularly, isn't it, Australia, your home country, it was quite extraordinary as well, wasn't it, in its restrictions?
Is presently quite extraordinary. I have actually informally renounced my citizenship. I no longer identify with that country or its people, especially not with its government. It's illegal to fly home. You face mandatory imprisonment for 2 weeks if you do fly home. If you fly home from India at present, the maximum penalty is £33,000 for doing so.
It's extraordinary. Yeah. What is it like where you are at the moment from the point of view of COVID?
Ukraine is fine. There are thousands of people in the streets. Restaurants are open. Their cases are falling, but they're still, I think, around 5,000 a day. I have a theory I'm working on that the more actual hardship a country has faced, the less likely they are to overreact to COVID.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Ukraine's history is riddled with oppression and misery. How can a virus do any worse than Russia?
Yes. I think actually that's a very interesting point, because if you look at, people are talking a lot about India at the moment. It might well be, there are economic reasons as well for the number of cases there. But at the same time, it's maybe a different attitude that people have. As you say, they have been nearer to life and death. I mean, isn't this really what actually shows the extraordinary sort of luxuriousness of the West? They can't handle it anymore. Do you think that's right?
The luxuriousness, but also a long-term denial and shelving of death. We don't like to think about it. We don't think it exists. We hide our dead as soon as they're gone. But India, of course, has a very influential and transcendental religion. So I imagine they don't mind death too much because they don't think it's all. I'm very wary of overstating the case when it comes to COVID.
Yes, but the thing is, nevertheless, you see, you introduced an interesting point there about religion, is that somehow, if there is a religious framework in this society, the attitude to this kind of thing will be slightly different. It doesn't mean to say that people are, going to be affected less, but their attitude will be different. Whereas, as you're quite right, we've sort of discarded, at least officially, we've discarded religion in that way. So therefore, we have to face that, my God, this might mean oblivion.
We've not only discarded religion and any value in death, we've also how do I phrase it? We've also numbed or kind of diluted our conception of living to the point where it is so inane and uninteresting that we need it to go on for as long as possible in order for it to have been considered a full life.
Right.
I genuinely consider that anybody who is living their life as fully as they possibly can at any one moment does not consider death to be the worst of all outcomes.
Right.
That's taken directly from ancient Greece, but it's something that really I cannot overstress the importance of. Yes. But nobody listens.
Do you actually live yourself, therefore, by what was written in ancient Greece and by ancient Greek authors? I mean, do you think that therefore that there is more to be got from them than there is, for example, from a modern self-help book?
Infinitely so. A modern self-help book is, first of all, probably written by somebody who needs self-help and external help. The ancient Greeks didn't write in order to make money. They wrote to illustrate their way of life. Yeah. And particularly the ancient heroic conception of living is when I first made sense of it from the best author on the heroic conception of life is Werner Jaeger, or C.M. Bauer. they elaborate and illustrate the heroic conception so clearly that it made sense to me that that's what I have been arguing for years already without actually knowing.
Yeah. Just one thing I wanted to ask as well, actually, Josh. You travel around a lot, although of course I should imagine that's quite relatively might be curtailed at the moment. But you live this life and you write. We have a writer here, a journalist called David Goodhart, and you might have heard of him, but he was looking at Brexit and he came up with these two groups that we have now in our kind of societies. Australia, Britain, America, anywheres and somewheres. Somewheres for people that basically drew a hell of a lot from their surroundings, from their locality and their nation and their family. And anywheres were the people who essentially saw themselves entirely in an international context, and somehow had very weak links to their locality. You seem to me to be possibly a somewhere in an anywhere's body. Would you say that is correct?
A somewhere in an anywhere's body. Perhaps. I don't want to get into the Freudian analysis of the somewhere and the anywhere, but I imagine a lot of what I do is a reaction against my Australian upbringing, feeling uprooted. I had very strong Scottish roots through my grandparents. But when you grow up so far removed from it, you might be likely to attempt to recover it. And that is how I see Europe. I used to consider Australia an outpost of European culture. Yeah. I don't anymore, but perhaps that's why I do what I do.
Because just on this point, do you think it's not just something about your change of attitude, is it? Australian society, are you saying, actually has changed?
Absolutely. My grandparents are dead, but they would not recognize the country that is currently floundering underneath Indonesia. I consider it. I haven't studied it at any great length, and I don't have a detailed hypothesis. But I think Australia used to be a European outpost in Asia. It is now it's an Asian outpost. They've flipped, if you will.
Yes. Well, look, Joshua, what do people do if they want to join the New Cavalier Reading Society? Can you tell them how they should go about it? Where should they go?
So if you go to my website, joshuahumphreys.com, or the Reading Society's website, newcavalierreadingsociety.com, and you click on join, there's a set of criteria that pops up. And if you meet those criteria, then we welcome you within our ranks.
Right.
Otherwise, find me on Instagram, send me a message, and I can discuss it with you at more greater length. And
when's the next novel going to be coming out?
Hopefully December. I'm in Ukraine to work on it. Half its characters are Ukrainian immigrants to Australia, so I'm here researching all the Ukrainian crazy that I can find.
Right.
I'm in Greece for the next 3 months to write its first and second drafts, and hopefully by December it shall be ready.
Well, look, thank you very much for breaking. I know you write in the morning, don't you? So thank you for breaking into your schedule and talking to us. All the very best. I think it's fantastic what you started and much needed at the moment too. Whatever your politics, I think it's much, much needed. Thanks very much indeed, Joshua.
Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure.
Good. That's it for this week, and we shall see you next time. In the meantime, do, as I said, please continue to subscribe, won't you? Thank you. Bye-bye.